it in, and someone else loans out that money, and then that increases the supply of money.
It actually increased the supply of money, yeah. So because of the way money's defined as checking account balances, savings account balances, if we get into M2, as well as the thing that our brains kind of immediately identify as currency, because of the way we keep track of money, our kind of key takeaway that we had last time is that our fractional reserve system, the banking system, creates money through banks making loans from a fraction of deposits on hand. So what started off as a $10,000 cash currency in a shoebox turned into much more money. And that's kind of where we left off, thinking about this multiplying process of the loans turn into deposits, and then into more loans, and then into deposits. And so we're going to capture that concept here with a little formula. We're going to put on some equation goggles and look at what's known as the deposit multiplier. The deposit multiplier. And it shows how money is created through deposits. All right, I'm just going to give you the formula. The change in the money supply, so MS, actually we haven't even totally defined that yet, have we? So let me add that in here. The money supply. Remember, the triangle is always change, so change in the money supply is equal to 1 over the required reserve ratio times the change in excess reserves. We did define this, but I'll write it out anyway today. So, excess reserves. RRR was the required reserve ratio, which you also should have in your notes from last time. Okay, so what were excess reserves again? What was the excess reserves?
What you have in deposits beyond your required reservation.
Okay, good, yeah. What you have in deposits beyond what you're required to hold back according to the Federal Reserve laws. So what you're required to hold back is this ratio. In our example with the shoebox, what was it? I gave it to you, I believe.
It was 10%.
Yeah, how much? 20%, right. So when we think of it as a ratio, it's just 0.2 rather than the percent. But it's okay to kind of verbalize it that way, that the Federal Reserve's rules are that banks have to hold back 20%. And therefore, what did excess reserves change by? So be careful with this. We had a transformation because Brandon did what with the cash? He had cash, he deposited it. So that was kind of the first action that took place. Did that action create any money? No, because M1, and remember M1 is M2, so M1 equals currency in circulation in the hands of the public, but not necessarily in the hands, it could be in a shoebox, plus checking account deposits. And so if Brandon found the cash and put it here, the level of M1 didn't change at all. It's like we used to have 10,000 in this category. We kind of minus 10 and then we plus 10. All we did is we transferred it so that the money supply was unchanged by that change in the composition. All right, but then some other powerful elements took off from there because Lewis wanted a car. How much did Patriots Bank have to loan out? 8,000. That's the excess reserves. So go ahead and plug in this formula. What is the answer to this final change that would have taken place according to the deposit multiplier? So you've got all the variables here. We had a deposit, a change in deposits initially equal to 10,000. That was Brandon putting it in Patriots Bank. What does the money supply change by? How much? 2,000. No, a little light. Not quite enough. $2,400. No, but it's going the right direction. It is bigger than 2,000 and 2,400. Pull out a little incentive here, my little extra credit pen. 3,600. No. 40,000. Bing, 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 bing. 40,000. Why? Okay. If we follow this formula here, the change in the money supply is equal to 1 over the required reserve ratio, which is 0.2, times the change in excess reserves, which went up by 8,000. From that deposit, we generated the ability to loan some money out, right? And so that amount of excess reserves was 8,000. 1 over 0.2 is like 2/10. Flip the denominator, multiply it times the numerator. 10 divided by 2 equals 5. The multiplier in this case is a 5. So we kind of call this part the multiplier. 5 times the change in excess reserves gives us the $40,000 change in the money supply. In class, we showed the first 2 steps of that, right? That was what the deposits were changing by, as I had that column of numbers. And I said, what was those first 2, and what was it, 14,600 or something like that? 14,400. Those first 2 changes.
Yeah.
14,400. And so then I said, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. So if you guys plop this into an Excel spreadsheet and added up all those changes, at the bottom you'd get to a really small, we'd be adding pennies eventually in fractions of pennies, and this is the number you'd get. So this is a nice little shortcut method by a mathematician. Some of you math majors might remember who came up with this. This is a repeating series type of thing. Anybody wanna? I really can't remember who to give credit to. Somebody smarter than me. But anyway, figured out that instead of doing that spreadsheet all the way down and then adding them up, oh, well, that's kind of simple. It came up with this neat little shortcut. So that is the deposit multiplier. Okay. This, I want to add a little note here. So note, this is known as the simple multiplier. This is the simple multiplier. The real world multiplier is more complex.
Because all available funds aren't necessarily loaned out.
Okay, good. Yeah. So Corbin's jumping at the bit here. So why would the real world multiplier not be as big? And you got it. do some banks choose not to loan out 8,000? That's possible. They could choose, if their desired reserves are greater than what's required, then they might want to only loan 7,000, right? So if they loan out less than the max, then this number is not going to get as big as it was. It would go 7,000 times 5, we'd get 35,000. So one reason why that would happen is banks may not loan out the maximum all excess reserves. All right, so Corbin's got one in the bag here. Somebody else come up with the second one that could throw a little wrench into our system? Remember, we had Brandon put the money in the bank loaned it all to Lewis. Lewis bought a car from Tustin Caddy. Tustin Caddy put it in the bank at Great Southern. Right? Great Southern loaned it out to Kurt. Went out to Apple. Apple took it and put it into Wells Fargo. Tell me from that process, that chain of events, what else could cause this to not get up to this number? One of them is that the banks might not loan all the money. What else could be going on? What's that? Nope, not interest rate change. Okay, not put all the money in the bank, right. So they could choose, maybe Lewis went out and said he was going to get $8,000 for the car, but when he went to the dealer, he was able to talk him down to $7,000, and he's like, oh, $1,000, I just carry this around in my wallet for a while, see what happens, right? So it's called a currency drain. If people hold wealth in the form of currency, it kind of draws away from that multiplier process. The thing that makes this thing max out is that people are holding their wealth in a checking account or a savings account, right? So all of that money is being held there, and that is definitely not going to be the case. So this really represents a theoretical maximum that the money supply could grow by. In reality, that multiplier is going to be something less due to this effect and also due to what we call currency drain. And this is people or firms choosing to hold some currency, which is pretty likely to happen. Even Brandon might not have put the full 10,000 in there. He might have been tempted to put in a little less than 10 and keep a little cash on hand. Okay, questions or comments there? All right, so let's talk about the Federal Reserve a bit more. The mysterious Fed, as we affectionately call it. What year did the Federal Reserve start? I gave that one to you. 1913. Good. So in 1913, the Federal Reserve Act created the central bank, and the setup was to have 7 individuals serve on a board called the Board of Governors. So let's call this Fed details. So remember, we're calling the Federal Reserve Bank the central bank of the United States, the Fed. So number one, there is a 7-member Board of Governors. Each one of these people serve a 14-year staggered term. They are appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. And then there's the chair. So the chair of the Federal Reserve serves a 4-year term. Anybody know who the chair of the Federal Reserve is right now? Bernanke. Your answer would have been right. The previous 8 years, we just had a change of the chair, effective here the last, I can't remember if it was January 1st or if it was earlier on in this month. We talked about women in power. First female chair of the Federal Reserve, Janet Yellen. Janet Yellen is the current chair. Janet Yellen was Bernanke, Ben Bernanke. And prior to that was Alan Greenspan. And he had a long run. Prior to that was Paul Volcker. So I guess I wasn't really intending to do all these was's, but there's a little method to my madness. So some of you might know that we call our business school the Angel Snyder School of Business. And that is named in part off two guys, Sherwin Snyder and then Wayne Angel. And I thought this would be kind of fun to pull up. I don't think I've ever done this before in class. So if you, oops, let me go to Google. Google. If you Google Wayne Angel, he is in Wikipedia here. That's a picture of him there, a couple of young pictures. I don't know if I just took away the picture, but so there's Wayne, born in Kansas, liberal Kansas. Went to a little school called Ottawa University. Went to University of Kansas for his PhD. Then he came back to Ottawa from 1959 to 1985. And then in 1985, he was appointed to that 7-member board. Pretty big deal. So he was one of the 7 people in the United States that controlled the supply of money. So it's an honor for him. Now, one of the things you might note that he, somewhere here, a chair in economics had been named for him at Ottawa University. That's my position. So it's an honor for me to have a guy like Wayne that was here at the university. I have enjoyed being a part of his legacy here. Okay, questions or comments there? So he was on this board from 1986 to 1994. So he had a pretty long run. And at the time, the chair was Paul Volcker. They're all called governors. So the person who's in the power seat, though, is the chair. So this is the one of the 7 members. One of the 7 members is the chair, and then there's 6 other people that serve. Okay? I later learned when I came to Ottawa, I really didn't know who Wayne Angel was, by the way, when I came here. Even going through the hiring process, it took me a while to learn all of what he did. I looked up some of it. But I later learned he was pretty influential on this board as well. And it was at a time in our history that was pretty tumultuous for money and banking. We had high inflation. What have we talked about inflation being on average the last 30, 40, 50 years, almost since the Fed was born in 1913? What kind of range? 2 to 3, yeah. Somewhere in the 2 to 3 range has been the inflation rate. When Wayne Angel jumped in the 80s and before, because he was serving up in Kansas City, I think, prior to that, we had inflation rates jumping up into 15, 17, 18%. So the United States was in kind of some hot water at that time, and it took some strong leaders on the Federal Reserve to correct some of that. And so we're going to learn what generates inflation rates like that as we go through the course. Okay, any other last comments there? A couple other key facts here. There is a 12-member federal open Market Committee. The FOMC. And on this board, we've got the seven-member board of governors plus 5. Well, and it's even better to just put 4. 4 rotating Fed bank presidents. Four rotating Fed bank presidents plus 1, the New York Fed bank pres. Okay, so these are the people that determine how much the Fed enters the capital market, for instance, to influence interest rates. So do you remember back in chapter 7 when we were talking about the demand and supply for capital, we talked about crowding out, right? The government needing to borrow money. They can jump into that marketplace and influence interest rates. And this is the group that's kind of a key part to that. Lastly, there are 12 Federal Reserve banks. 12 Federal Reserve banks. Now, on your currency, if you guys pull out your purses and wallets, what I like to do is see if we can this little emblem here on your dollar bills will tell you the Federal Reserve Bank it was printed at. So one of the functions of the banks is to print money. And so this one I got is Richmond, Virginia. There's 11 other ones. Let's see how many we can get as a class. So we got Richmond, Virginia. So as you guys find them, tell me what you got. Kansas City. Yes, we got a Federal Reserve Bank in Kansas City.